Hello, everybody. This is your favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast produced in Windsor, Ontario. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I am your co-host, Mike L., and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be looking at Spider-Man comics from November of 1982. We're going to start off with The Amazing Spider-Man number 234, then Marvel Team-Up 123, then we're going to go to Peter Parker's The Spectacular Spider-Man number 72, and then this week we actually have an annual to talk about, so we have Marvel Team-Up Annual number 5.
That's right, and to help us out this week, we have a very special guest. Can you please say hello, special guest?
Hello.
And can you introduce yourself, please, as well?
Hello, this is G.I. Jolie from the Comic Book Syndicate.
Yes. And you've been on our Spider-Cast show before, right? I can't remember.
Nope.
I don't think
No, this is
Spider-Cast.
your first one.
Nope.
But
I've been on.
No, that's right.
Quasar, you've been on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good times today. So yeah, quarantine. We're in the quarantine. Everything's good to go.
I affectionately have been calling it Quarantown, but
Oh.
yeah.
Whoa, that's pretty hip.
In honor of the game I can't play.
Well, I just got back from grocery shopping for like 5 hours, so I am ready to go and talk about comic books.
Yeah, let's not talk about the outside world, and let's jump into New York from 1982.
Yes, fantasy world time, guys. Okay.
Yeah, so let's
here
start
we
off.
Go.
Yeah, let's start things off with Amazing Spider-Man 234. Mike, what do you think about this cover?
I freaking love it.
It's great, right?
Yes. G.I. Jolie and I just reviewed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in which they used a process called... Jolie, was it called Zipatone or Ziptone?
Ziptone.
Ziptone. Okay, so I don't know if that's what they used on Will-O-the-Wisp here, Jolie, but it's pretty cool. What do you think? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love this cover. Mm-hmm. We've got, and yeah, like as everyone knows, we're changing the format a little bit. We're not getting into such detail with the plot, but we're definitely going to talk about this awesome cover by John Romita Jr. and Al Milgrom. We've got a really cool shot of Will-O-the-Wisp, like again, kind of like just a silhouette with all this zip tone, and he's all green, and Spider-Man is being, overwhelmed by his energy. And then, of course, this beautiful cover is completely ruined by this banner at the bottom right that says, Special Feature, 16-page bonus insert, the Marvel Comics Guide to Collecting Comics. But other than that, it's a great cover. Jolie, what do you think?
It's all right.
Josh?
I think that...
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jolie. Sorry, go ahead, Jolie. You're going to say something else?
I don't know. I just, it's kind of a strange choice for a cover because of the nature of, it's weird. It's just the lighting, right? So it seems odd that something that's that kind of perspective where the light is hitting, it's really just, it's one of those things that is hard to look at. So... I think it's a strange choice.
Interesting.
Josh, you're a fan?
Yeah, I kind of liked it. I think that Spider-Man maybe is a little bit of a weird pose. Like his one arm, like shielding his eyes, is kind of strange, and his legs are spread out maybe a little bit too much. But I really like the contrast of Will-O-the-Wisp against like the explosion, like how he turns into that giant glowing orb. I like the idea that they were going for with the light. Like I like that how Spider-Man is like silhouetted in this like white like brim light almost. Yeah, and then it, like his colors are a little bit more dull, and he's all black instead of the blue to show that it's shadowed. So he definitely pops in front of this white, and so does Will-O-the-Wisp with that like bright green and yellow like fade. I think it's pretty interesting. It's definitely nicer than some of the other covers that we've seen. But I think overall I like it.
Yeah. So I'll summarize this story. So sure. I actually, to be honest, I really, really like this issue. Like basically, it feels like it's been forever since I read it. But so we've got a guy, basically Will-O-the-Wisp. It's hard to explain this guy, but he's kind of like, I don't even know what his powers are. He's sort of like this mystical energy creature. Like I don't even know what he is.
Yeah, I I believe he was experimented on. Right? I think that they kind of go into that a little bit here, where he was one of the experiments in this lab.
Right.
So he kind of just has been like merged with this. His body has kind of been merged with this energy, so he can kind of like shoot the energy out of his, hands and turn into this giant light ball. And like, I guess he can also like turn his body into energy and inhabit like computer systems and stuff like that. So it's not made completely clear what his powers are, but energy, I guess, in one word.
Yeah, like, is this the first time we see him in the series?
No, definitely not. We've seen him before, yeah, for sure.
And it's been pretty much the same. Like we get the idea that he's got big energy powers, but at least I don't remember. At least I don't remember much of an origin for him. I think that he was just there, from what I remember, from what I recall.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't think that we got much of his backstory. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just forgetting. But
well, I'll just say, I'm just going to summarize this issue quickly. So basically, I don't even like. There's a couple plots going on, but they all sort of intersect. Like Tarantula gets this idea that he is going to get his powers altered so he can be more like Spider-Man, right? And at the same time that's happening, Will of the Wisp, I can't remember, why is he breaking into this place again?
He's there to destroy it because they are experimenting on people, and he pretty much wants to just destroy the place. And he doesn't really want to harm the security guards or anything, so you kind of get the idea that he feels like he's doing something just, maybe going about it in the wrong way, but he's pretty much there to blow up the building and take out these people that are in charge. And Spider-Man gets in the way, and I think he actually says something about, "Oh, perfect, I could take you down while I'm here," kind of thing. So yeah, we get this this interesting fight. Once again, we kind of have this this character that has these like extreme powers that Spider-Man can't really deal with his movesets and everything. So it's definitely fun to see how Spider-Man deals with these powers and kind of gets over it, gets past these kind of celestial type powers.
Well, I'll just say that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jolie.
Well, I'm not sure how much into research or backstory you go into initially, but Will-O-the-Wisp is it's a ghost light. The origins of the name, it's from folklore. So that makes sense when he's sort of manipulating or kind of mind controlling the guards at the Brand Corporation when he's trying to break in. But I read that his power is to control electromagnetic particles, especially those in his body.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe he's somehow controlling those magnetic particles in other people as well?
Maybe. I think the light that he becomes is the whole thing with the Will-O-the-Wisp is that it's light that is that tricks kind of like the sirens' voices, where he the light mesmerizes you into seduction. So I think that's kind of his power when he becomes light, or when he's, I guess, I don't know, Jedi mind tricking people.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, anyway. I don't mind when in stories they don't do a deep dive into the character's backstory or explain to you step by step how the powers work. But it is weird, and you can notice that in this story, that they will just give them powers because the story needs them to have those powers. And that's what it feels like sometimes, and that's why I feel like maybe I'm missing a little bit of an explanation of how it works.
I don't know. I'll just say, for me, to me, this is the definition of superhero fun. It's really fast moving and there's intersecting plots. And for some reason, because we reviewed an issue of Amazing Spider-Man last week with Becca, and she didn't like it because she thought it was just jumping into the middle of the story. And so I was trying to keep that in mind when I read this, and I felt like this was a really good like obviously it's part one of a story because there's going to be more, but I thought it was a really great just jumping on point. Like you didn't really need any explanation to really know what's going on. You just kind of jump in. Will-O-the-Wisp is there. He's doing his thing. Peter Parker's doing his thing, and then they're just off to the races, you know? So I just found it really refreshingly fast moving, and the fact that we had Tarantula coming back, and again, the fact that his story is intersecting with what else is going on, I just thought that was really cool. So I really like this issue.
I can definitely agree with that. I think that the story itself was pretty good. You don't really need a whole lot of backstory coming into it. I just felt that Will-O-the-Wisp himself, maybe it felt like there needed to be something, I don't know.
More?
Yeah,
Jolie, what did you
more.
think?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that I was, that's one of the notes that I took was that the plot to me was totally confusing, and I had no idea this was a jumping on point or a part one of an arc. So I was like, do you know what? I know that's it's chronological. I'm a little bit caught up. So I listened to Becca's podcast and I caught that note too. And also, you guys talked about Tarantula, so I was like, oh, I see. So Tarantula kind of is running off from the last story into this book. But I still don't know who Will-O-the-Wisp is, and I don't know why he's trying to destroy the brand, like the brand corporation. To me, it didn't seem as for someone who isn't as steeped in like Peter Parker's New York, his world, like it was not easy to follow at all. I can't even recommend jumping in on this. Like there was just nothing. There's nothing for me to like, kind of latch onto other than like the fact that you see this mysterious character initially. You're already kind of spoiled about him when you see the cover. So one, the cover for me is so inaccurate that it's not enticing enough for me to want to read. But then when you open it up and you look, it's like, okay, so he's some masked figure is breaking into a building, and he's able to he's able to mesmerize a guard, walk through a wall, and then you see who he is, and it's like, now shall Will-O-the-Wisp have his revenge? And you go, okay, what revenge? So you keep reading and you still don't know what that revenge is, and it never really clears that up for you. He just seems like he's on a villainous tirade, and then suddenly it cuts to the Daily Bugle, and then it cuts that explosion short and goes right to the Daily Bugle where Peter Parker is, and it's like, oh yes, that's right, this is a Spider-Man comic.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's... Maybe we'll find out eventually exactly why he wants revenge, but I think it's just... Honestly, I didn't even cross my mind to worry about why he wants revenge. I don't know. I was pulled in by the story and just sucked along.
I think for me,
so swept along.
Like, up to this point, like for this issue, maybe in next issue, like he will have more to do with the story, but it felt like this shouldn't have been Will-O-the-Wisp story, and it should have been more about the Tarantula. Like, wouldn't it have been more interesting if maybe the Tarantula did something to like mutate himself into, like, I guess spoiler for the end of the issue, he mutates himself into like this monstrous, like half human, half spider thing, not, you know, kind of like this grotesque extra limbed monster, right? Wouldn't it be more interesting if maybe like Spider-Man shows up to stop this, and then through his actions and his anger, he tries to rip out, and then like it stops that mutation process early, and then something happens where he turns into this monster because of that? Like, it seems weird that Will-O-the-Wisp is here, and it's just kind of like coincidental that he just happens to mess this up for Tarantula.
Possibly, yeah.
Like,
possibly.
It could have been more interesting if he was there to stop Tarantula. Like, he has some sort of beef with him, or, you know, nothing like that is ever explained. You just kind of get this idea that he wants to blow up this building, and then that's it. And now it seems like this story is going to be more about Tarantula than Will-O-the-Wisp in the next issue. Like, the last thing we see is Spider-Man carrying Will-O-the-Wisp out of the building by his hair.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's just, I don't know. I feel like for me, Will-O-The-Wisp was the weakest part of the story. I was more interested to see what was going to happen to Tarantula, and like him realizing that he's not as powerful and as strong as Spider-Man, so he's got to do something to match that strength. So he goes as far as he can to kind of mutate himself into his Spider-Man's match. Like, that's way more interesting than I got to blow up this building. Why? I'm not going to tell you. Just going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that could be true, but I think I just like the idea of Tarantula getting this idea, and then in the same issue, he's already doing it, and in the same issue, we find out what went wrong. I think I just appreciate the fact that it was so fast-moving. That's one thing I really liked about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of these comics are at this time, but I just find that I think that Amazing Spider-Man does the best job at it.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm good with fast pace and, like, you know, having some fun action and hurrying the story along, but I feel like they rushed it maybe a little bit too much, and we didn't get enough of what was, like, why everything was happening. We knew what was going on, we just didn't know why, or, you know, what the characters' motivations were. So
all right, well, let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about the art. Josh and I have talked about John Romita Jr. Ad nauseum on the show. We love him. Jolie, what's your impression of the art of this issue?
It's very, to me, it's very, when I don't notice it or it doesn't do anything to kind of push me out of the story, it means it's good. It means it's doing what it's supposed to. The storytelling is really good. It's detailed where it needs to be. It's simple where it needs to be, especially in a world like Peter Parker's. Like, especially, I'm just going through the office scenes and his sort of like IRL world, outside of his superheroics, and it's just, it's a really good pared down version of what, like, you know, a newsroom should be.
Right.
You look at comics today and they're you know, they really are preoccupied with like how many bricks are in each wall or how many pieces of paper are in this stack, and in this it's just like, no, it's just simple shapes and simple lines and like characters moving through them, and like they really let the inking suggest the texture in things like hair, the shine of clothing, the fuzziness of a sweater, like, and it's not until you kind of look back on it that you go, oh, okay, that's really well rendered. Like, it's not until you get to places like there's a few sort of standouts, like J. Jonah Jameson's brush cut is awful.
Yeah.
Or let's see here, where something really stood out for me. It was really weird. When you get like close-ups, to me, I guess I've read enough manga to expect that when you go into a close-up of a character's face, there's going to be more detail rendered out. Mm-hmm. But here, it's just like the same level of simplicity, and that's kind of strange for me. So yeah.
I'm used to that, so it didn't. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, like it's no matter what the scale is, like small or big or whatever, however far zoomed you are, it's the same amount. So I mean, that's fine, but I guess that it wasn't. There wasn't anything spectacular about it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
You know, I never thought about that, the close-up thing. That's very true. Mike and I have always talked about how John Romita Jr. is really great at layouts and like making you understand where everything is taking place by, like, the first few panels are very detailed and like you get a sense of the office, for example, and then the next few panels you don't need to see all the details in the background and what's going on. It's usually blank panels and he shows you exactly what's important and what you should be focusing on. And I think that's why he works. But I think that you make a really good point that in those close-ups, maybe seeing a little bit more detail would kind of get those points across a little bit more. And again, lend itself to that, like, the storytelling is happening in the panels and not by the words in the bubbles. So
yeah, and I guess I can't remember it's right before the Brand Corporation explodes. There's a close-up. Like, I wouldn't have a problem with the whole zooming in, zooming out detail thing if it weren't for the fact that it's not consistent. There's a picture of a guard who's going to pull a phone off of a wall to call in to call into security for more backup.
Right.
And he uses the inks in a way to suggest more detail. That is and that's I would almost, it's not an extreme close-up, but it's a close-up. And maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 pages later, when you get the close-up of the doctor who's working on the tarantula, you get his face, but it's not, he doesn't use the inks in the same way. Where this is an extreme close-up, you would expect maybe like just lighter, thinner strokes, but they're really thick, suggestive strokes, and it's not consistent for me. But that's just like an art criticism standpoint. Like it's very minute. But if you're thinking about it, then you'll see it. But yeah. I mean, other than that, all of the action, in my opinion, the action is rendered like really well. Has an understanding of anatomy underneath muscle, obviously, because these characters are so, they're clad in like very skin tight wear for hero ability. So you can see that he knows, like these drawings are informed by an education in anatomy, and that is really something that is totally lacking nowadays. So yeah, I'm really excited to see this.
I completely agree with you. Actually, I'm going to point to digital page 16. I believe it's original 15. Right as Peter Parker is about to crawl through the vents at the corporation, he's pulling the mask over his face, and normally you get that like nice like rounded like egg shape that Spider-Man's face has when he's got the mask on, but he's pulling it down, and you can see the imprint of his nose and like his jawline as he's stretching it. It's so good because you can see the anatomy of his face underneath the mask as he's stretching that spandex. It's so great.
Yep.
It's really simple, but it like gets it across so well.
Effective.
And that to me is one of the biggest things about comics, is that the seeing fabric in the way that it lays on the human body is really important for me. So like in the panel just before the last panel, I should say, like there's something about 80s comics where they just understood fashion, and it's like I feel like they taught it, whereas nowadays they teach anatomy, but they don't teach how apparel the structure of apparel, and then how it would sit around a neck or around a wrist.
Right.
And right now, people just draw a line for like a collar, and it just doesn't work for me.
That last panel on that page that you were talking about with the guy walking through the door, like even the way that like it's such a far away shot, like there's such little detail, but you can see how the pants are folding as he walks, and like I know exactly how that folds. I've worn dress pants many times. I know exactly that when you walk, it kind of folds awkwardly in that, kind of like hip area. It's so good. Yeah.
And it's just the knowledge and the experience of using a brush and knowing what kinds of marks make those suggestions. And that's what I think is the most successful about his art in this, is that with the inking, did Romita do the inking too?
No, it wasn't.
It was done by...
it wasn't Jim Mooney this issue. It was somebody else. Oh.
I think it's Dan Green.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, this is like... I mean, just looking at this page alone, like you look at his leg when he's inside the vent. You look at his leg just as he's crawling inside the vent. It is just how he uses that ink, that black, to suggest things. It's like that's experience right there. That's what I don't see enough of in comic books today. But anyway, we could go on forever.
Yeah.
I want to give a quick example. The page that stood out to me was digital page 4.
Okay.
I just love that page when Will-O-The-Wisp becomes like a kind of like a sun. And then the guy is like on the ground and the chair is tipped over. Then Will-O-The-Wisp, flies down the hallway. Then the guy hits the alarm, and then the next shot you see the people running, and then the next shot you see the sun and all the piping, and the next shot you see he's ripping them apart. I just love that page, just how fast the story moves there. That's a perfect example of what I was talking about.
So much
that's classic.
Go ahead.
Right.
So
that's
much happens
Marvel
in,
method
in
right
six panels. So much happens, and
right.
without the bubbles, without any sort of dialogue at all, you know exactly what is happening. Like you don't need to know what building they're in. You can see it. I don't know how to describe it. It's just the way that everything is laid out and the stories told through these drawings is perfect, and that's why I think I like John Romita Jr. so much.
Right. Me too.
And the dialogue is just the right amount of dialogue that it's like, it's not over, there's not over exposition in the dialogue. Like, I wouldn't know, just going on Digital 4, where we left off there, like the last panel where where Will-O-the-Wisp is holding all of those tubes in his arms. Mm-hmm. If he wasn't narrating his actions, I wouldn't know what he's doing. But he is, and it works. Like, so often. It
adds to it.
Yeah, so often, and in the comics that we're going to review later, that's going to be a criticism of mine, where there's so much exposition in the dialogue, the balloons and the thought bubbles, that it detracts from the story. Yeah. But in this issue, like in this comic, it's wound tight enough that it moves the story along. It moves with the pace, and it's like perfect.
Right. So I would say that I would definitely recommend this comic. Jolie, what do you think?
I would recommend this comic, if not for the and I have to recommend especially the interaction that he has at home with Mr. Pincus, his neighbor. That's my favorite part of this book. So favorite.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Well,
Pincus is such a weird character that just like reoccurring. I don't get it. But sorry?
You see him in other issues?
Yeah. I
think it just fleshes out his supporting cast, right?
Yeah, he started off by being this like just voice that you heard through the walls, and he was like this awful country singer. And you would only hear him like yodeling and singing and like screeching. And then finally you meet him when Spider-Man like is so angry he punches a hole through the wall, and he sees him like on the other side, and then from there he just keeps showing up. It's ridiculous. I think he's one of the most ridiculous recurring characters. But I think I would recommend this. I'd recommend this issue with the asterisk that I feel like you would enjoy it better if you were reading Amazing Spider-Man already. I don't think it's a good jumping in point per se, but I think it's a good issue.
Okay.
All around.
All right, fair point. Okay, so let's jump now to Marvel Team Up number 123 with special guest Daredevil. And Josh, you want to tell us quickly what this one's about?
Sure. Okay, so we have Spider-Man in the hospital after his fight with Man-Thing from last issue. And as he's healing, he kind of runs into Matt Murdock, who's there to talk to one of his clients. He's convincing this like mobster guy to confess his crimes after he found out that he has cancer. So he only has a little bit of time to live. So he's deciding, you know what, I'm going to kind of do right in the last few moments I have. And then Solar shows up, and he's there to kill this guy. I can't remember why he's there to kill him, but he's there to kill him. So Spider-Man...
He's a hitman sent to kill him.
Solar is a hitman. It's just so weird, I guess. But but Spider-Man and Daredevil end up teaming up and taking down Solar. And at the end of the day, this mobster kind of learns his lesson. And I guess he doesn't really save the day. He ends up like kidnapping this kid to use him as like a hostage to get away, and then he ends up kind of letting the kid go at the end of the issue. So we're kind of like left like is he gonna confess or not? Maybe he's learned his ways, but what did you think about the issue? Like,
Well, I have mixed feelings about it, but we can get into that later.
Sure.
Julie, this is your first time reading Marvel Team Up, I believe. What is your impression of this issue?
Well, it's like everyone was sitting in a room and said, huh, we really want Spider-Man to hang out with Daredevil in an issue. What could we how could we possibly pull that off? And they came up with the list of 10 really, really great ones. And then they took the one at the very bottom that was shite.
Wow.
It's not great.
You describing that makes me think that you've read lots of Marvel Team Up because that's pretty much what this comic is all about, trying to shove Spider-Man into stories he does not belong in.
Right? Matt Murdock could have been in a sandwich shop eating a sandwich, and Peter Parker could have I'm already rewriting a better one. He could have been he could have walked into the same deli, or maybe where he delivers pizzas from, or whatever he does now. Maybe it's right beside that sandwich shop, and I don't know, there are a trillion different things.
You know what's so funny, Jolie, is I was actually going to say that this one isn't too bad, and that I thought that the characters blended well together, but I feel like it's just because we have been given so many stories where Spider-Man just doesn't belong. It's not even this where they try to mush it together. It's just that Spider-Man is just there along for the ride for somebody else's story. So,
honestly, Spider-Man is in the hospital because of an injury he's suffering from probably another fight, and that's the only reason why he's in the hospital, in the bed next to where Matt Murdock is with the criminal whose name is Peepers.
Peepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this honestly isn't bad. Sometimes Spider-Man is just swinging along and he sees some guy and he just joins up with him, and the only reason he's there is to throw a couple of punches, and then we're there to see somebody else's story. So honestly, this one is not as bad as some of the other Marvel team-ups. There's
so
been
this is
some
idea
rough
number
ones.
9, not idea number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is it's gotten better since Kerry Gammill's taken over art. We'll talk about the art a little bit. And I did think this was a decent issue, but overall, personally, I can't stand Solar. I've never liked the name. I've never liked the costume. He just looks like he's just like the name Solar. It sounds like a He-Man toy or something. But also, the thing I didn't like about this issue was how basically they kind of split up, and Daredevil goes and does his thing with Peepers, right? And then Spider-Man does his thing with Solar, which we've seen happen in Marvel Team Up before. Right. And it's kind of like we were saying earlier. It's well, really, why is this one story then? It's probably just a Daredevil story with Spider-Man and Solar thrown in, right? So, the stories do connect, but it's not really like in a Seinfeldian way where everything wraps up together. They just happen to kind of overlap,
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't mind it as much, this issue. I think that having Spider-Man interact with the kid, and kind of try to cheer him up after he was just rushed to the hospital. I will say how they brought the kid into the story is wild. Having this 8-year-old kid get stabbed by a 12-year-old kid for pennies.
Right.
It was just you couldn't come up with anything else. The kid couldn't have been playing in the park and then ran into the street to get a ball and was hit by a car or something. You're going to have a 12-year-old run into this random house to stab a little kid to steal rolls of pennies. Yeah. It was just so weird and it's like an awful episode of 1,000 Ways to Die. It's just the most wild way you could possibly come up of it with an injury. It's just so weird.
Oh yeah, and not to mention the fact that he's freshly stitched up and running around the hospital bleeding out. Because this is a severe stab wound. So obviously this wasn't some kind of playground shiv. This other kid stabbed this kid with something very substantial, in the 80s.
Yeah,
for
it's
pennies.
Very weird. It's also really weird. I don't think it was Marvel Team Up. It was Spectacular last issue. We had the really kind of deep gun violence issue.
Yeah, that was spectacular.
And I think that they really handled that well with children and violence, and this one just felt so weird and cartoonish and like how it happened. Like, it's just weird. Anyways, but I will say I did like that Spider-Man went over to the kid to kind of cheer him up, and that kind of brought the kid into the story a little bit and gave the kid a reason to be there at the end, to be like a hostage, and it wasn't just this guy ran into a room and stole a kid.
Yeah.
So at least there's a reason the stories were separated and then came together at the end with Daredevil and Spider-Man. But
I don't know. I think my analysis or whatever of DeMatteis is that it seems like he just has a lot of ideas, but they're not really... Like, instead of taking one idea and then growing it organically, he has a bunch of ideas and he tries to cram them all together, you know?
Right.
But they don't always fit together. And so when I'm reading this, I'm enjoying it because it's Spider-Man and you know, it's fun, but I don't think it's a great story. You know what I mean? I'm not sure. I'm on the fence of whether or not I'd want to read it again, you know? So overall, yeah, I don't think the story was really successful.
No.
It wasn't great, no. But let's talk about the art. Obviously, Josh and I have talked about Kerry Gammill before. We like Kerry Gammill. But before we get to the interiors, let's talk about the cover here. This is almost the same as the other cover, but from the other side, right?
Yeah.
So, Jolie, what's your impression of this cover?
This one is probably, I hate to say that it's more realistic. This is exactly how I would expect the lighting to fall on Spider-Man in the old cover. The way it's falling on Solar. Is it Solar with 2 R's? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that the light kind of, the way he's silhouetted is a little bit more realistic. I just don't understand what the preoccupation is with like showing every single curvature of muscle on a man in a spandex suit in comics. Like,
wow. That's because, you know, the average comic book reader that's male thinks girls are icky, so, you know.
So he'd rather... Sorry, how explicit can I get here?
Go ahead.
So what, like... I don't understand. It's like, well, if you think women are icky, you just want to see half-naked men?
All I can say is that growing up in the 1980s, the epitome of male macho, testosterone was Motley Crue, and they were dressed up as women in black leather. So that was a very confusing time to be a man. Let's just leave it at that, okay? But anyway, so yeah, the cover is by Ed Hannigan, and it's Ed Hannigan who draws Spectacular on a regular basis, and inked by Al Milgram, our pal. We love him. And the interior is by Kerry Gammill and Mike Esposito. So Jolie, completely different art style on this one. What did you think of the art in Marvel Team Up?
Again, to me, it's like, oh, cool, this is a comic. Nothing about it was like out of the ordinary. Nothing was overly stylistic. Nothing was overly terrible that it took me out or made it unreadable. So in my opinion, it's just like, no, this is great. This is how I feel like comics should look. But then again, it's like I grew up reading Archie, so everything was very like there's a template for everything. So this is, to me, if there was like a template for the way that these comics should look, like this would just like fall in line with all of that, like right down to the lettering, right down to like the amazing the typography. I can't get over rivers of blood. Like, I looked at that panel forever.
Where's that again?
It's the very first page.
Yeah.
Right when you flip off Burn Heroes Burn, you see rivers of blood.
Yes.
And it's such a lost art. Anyway.
Yeah, well, it all comes down to hand-drawn art, hand-drawn lettering, right?
Yeah, that's
There's
true.
no computers to be seen. Yeah.
No, it's very unique. I really like the design, the overlapping O's and like the V kind of being like off to the side. Yeah, it's really well done.
Yeah, it's like it's just such a strange choice for me too, because it's like the double O link reminds me of like Gucci or Chanel, and it's kind of fashion for me, and that's why I was looking at it for so long.
See, I thought that they were doing like a Daredevil thing.
Oh, probably.
I should point out the letterer is Diana Albers, a woman, so maybe that's what she had in mind.
So the letterer will also do headlines and titles?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, cool. Well, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. Maybe she like comes from sorry, I can't think of the word. Like an editorial background.
Maybe, yeah.
But anyway, okay. So moving on.
But
I think the art's amazing. Like the one thing I'll have to give to this person too is that they thought about the way that they thought about the women. Not every single woman in this comic is a blonde white female.
Right. Good point. Yep.
So, I mean, I have to snap for that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the thing is, I think, I definitely came across Kerry Gammill as a kid, mostly in Superman, and a lot of these artists I came across as a kid, like, guys like Alex Savio, Gonçalo Buscema, and people like that, and I was really indifferent to them. But then 20, 30 years go by, and you go back and look, and you're like, oh my god, I never appreciated this when it was happening, but I wish comics still looked like this, right? Mm-hmm. That's how I feel, anyway. But anyway, that's enough about Marvel Team Up. So I think we all kind of have mixed feelings about this one, right? Like, I definitely like it, but I don't love it.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the idea behind it.
Right.
Again, I don't think that they really executed the almost mental torment that this guy, what's his name? Not Chatters.
Peepers,
yeah. Whatever his name is. I don't think that they handled that very well. Like, it was like a cartoony crazy rather than this psychological torment that he's going through of facing the fact that he's dying and trying to account for everything that he's done in his life before he's gone and it's too late. And by the I kind of felt that at the beginning, but then by the end when he kidnaps the kid and then it just is like a raving lunatic by the end, it just felt like it could have been
the tone. Yeah,
it could have been such a great. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, it's like the tone is all off, right?
Yeah.
It's like he wants to do this, he wants to do that, but he doesn't develop anything properly, and so it just feels like it's all just thrown in there, right?
Yeah, and then that note that we end on where it's the last page is a half a panel at the bottom, and he's just looking at his hands saying blood, blood, blood over again. It's
right.
It would have been, I don't know, maybe that's what they were going for, was this criminal doesn't change, but I don't know, it would have been better if he was able to sacrifice himself or change by the end of it. Maybe Solar's the one that kidnaps the kid at the end and he jumps in and saves the kid and kind of has a little bit of a redemption before he does pass away or something. But this just seemed like such an awful way to do things. I don't know, maybe because they were setting him up as a redemption at the beginning, but yeah, I think it was all right.
Yeah, it was just all right. Yeah, again, it was definitely enjoyable, but not a highly recommended issue. Yeah. So now we're gonna jump ahead to Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, number 72, and I love this cover by Ed Hannigan, painted cover with Spidey and Dr. Octopus. But Jolie, can you just tell us briefly what this comic is about?
Okay, so from what I can assess from what's going on, Doc Ock is in jail, or he's been done away with and there's no threat of him anymore, maybe, but there is this little sort of clique, like a superhero fan club gang run by a guy named Ollie, who dresses up as Dr. Octopus and kind of wants to emulate him, and the story just kind of takes life from there. Yeah, what I don't really know what else there is to say, because he doesn't do anything interesting with the hobby. He gets kicked out of his little supervillain group, but he he's like, well, do you know what? I'm just gonna go bait Spider-Man like Doc Ock would do, and then he sets about doing those things.
Right.
To see if he can trap Spider-Man. So what does he do? He robs a grocery store first, but he just steals all the comics and the candy.
Right. I think it's important to note this kid has his own like Doc Ock suit, right? So it's it's very similar to the Doc Ock arms, but it's like a backpack and it's built in. So they are metal and they do like work the exact same way. But so
they have this weird ability to like, and I don't even know where a kid would get that kind of technology. Like he's using them to hoist his friends around the room. Like that's like serious money.
Yeah. I think he says something about like he took the technology from his dad or something at the beginning. I think. Well,
I try not to worry about it too much, but to me, this is like a classic, lighthearted, I guess, not quite comedy, but it's like, I don't know if you guys remember, Josh, do you watch Doctor Who?
Yeah, I have watched quite a bit of it.
I think it was in season 1, you remember, of the reboot. Do you remember when there was like a Doctor Who fan club and the Doctor didn't even appear in the issue and they had like a band or something?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it just kind of reminds me of just this whole idea that there's this gang of teens who instead of playing, Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing or whatever, they just dress up as supervillains. I just think that's really a cool idea,
Right.
Like, especially compared to the last year's worth of Spectacular, where it's all about, like, drug dealers and violence and guns, and now we just take a complete left turn. So, I don't know. This wasn't my favorite issue of Spectacular, but it's definitely a nice contrast to the last, few. Like, what did you think, Josh?
I think that the story is goofy, which is fine. Like, I'm all in for a corny superhero story if like the tone and the art all matches and it kind of flows nicely, but this one at times felt a little disjointed and it felt like things just happened rather than like a fun, strong like superhero arc.
Right.
I don't know. Like I'm so mixed and like halfway liking it and disliking it because there's some really fun things and then other times things just happen. Like I don't really fully get the motivations of this like kid that we're following. Like he idolizes the supervillains and he really looks up to Doc Ock. Why? I don't really know. I guess he's a smart scientist, but there's so many smart scientists in comics at this time. It's weird that he's chosen. He uses these arms to go and like rob a corner store and all he takes is candy and comics, and then after that he's like, you know what, I know what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna go rob the toy store, and then from there Spider-Man stops him and they're like fighting in this toy store, which seems like a mad scientist lab version of a toy store. Like it's just wild. A gigantic fish bowl and like a giant clown Jack-in-the-Box. Like it just feels weird. And then at the end when Spider-Man realizes it's a kid and the kid like is saved by Spider-Man, he now idolizes Spider-Man and just like switches on a dime. Like nothing happens. He just stops. The Spider-Man just stops this kid and he's like, whoa, Spider-Man, you're cool. I'm gonna idolize you now. It's like, why did you not idolize him from the start? Like Doc Ock is a known supervillain at this point, right? Like Dr. Octavius is not like inventing things and being a hero, right? That everybody knows that Doc Ock is Octavius. It's not like there's an alter ego there, or like I don't know. It's so weird.
Well, for me, it just reminded me of like a funny episode of like a Saturday morning cartoon or G.I. Joe or Transformers. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. It wasn't great, but I enjoyed it. Jolie, what did you think?
It was. I guess I have the exact same things to say about this. It wasn't great. It wasn't great, and I only moderately enjoyed it. Mostly because I just couldn't get behind this kid. He just seemed so misguided and like I can't suffer a buffoon, and he is definitely he's definitely like, public enemy number one.
Right.
But like not in a cool rap way.
So Jolie, obviously Josh and I are big fans of Ed Hannigan and Al Milgrom. Is it Al Milgrom? Ed Hannigan and Al Milgrom, yes. I want to know, Jolie, what's your first impression of the art in this issue?
Again, it's the same as I've been seeing a lot. If there was a it's the same praise I've been singing a lot. Is that if there was a template for Spider-Man or like a brand kit for how a Spider-Man comic should look, this is just like towing the line, making sure that like all of the boxes are checked. Anatomy's there, consistency in costuming, sort of the same way that they all render faces is it doesn't change. It's pretty on the mark. So yeah, like it's very indicative of like the best parts of the 80s, I would say.
Yeah, like I can't remember when it switched over to Al Milgrom, but I definitely don't think the inks are as polished as Jim Mooney's, but
no,
there's still a couple great shots. What do you think, Josh? Do you agree?
There were a couple of panels where I felt like the anatomy was just completely off for some reason. I didn't feel that in last issue, but this one, there were a couple of things. Like at the beginning, we have Spider-Man swinging through the city in this like the second page splash page. It's really good, but like the second last Spider-Man, his arm and hand is like just broken completely. His leg looks like it's completely facing the wrong way. And then a little while later, when Spider-Man jumps through his sunroof in the bathroom, his arm looks like it's completely dislocated. Like his shoulder is popped out. I can't remember what. I can't see the page number.
Yeah, I think it's digital 10.
Right.
I have digital 10.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. It didn't take me out, but I found myself noticing it a little bit more in this issue, and I can't put my finger on why.
Well, again, it's probably because Al Milgrom inked this issue, and great guy, but he's not the greatest artist. He's not the greatest inker, so that's probably why I'm going to guess.
Right.
But I do want to. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jolie.
Well, it just baffles me how people can get into this industry and not have any clue about human anatomy.
Oh, there's a lot of them. Believe me.
No, it's so. It's. A rendering of a human is just more than lines. Like, there's a reason why that line's there. It's because there's bone there. That's, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, the one that you were talking about where he comes through his, like, Peter Parker's a poor photographer / student, but he has a skylight in his New York apartment, like, in the ghetto. Anyway, so when he's coming through the skylight, the whole disjointedness, like, I can see how maybe the penciler drew that properly, but the inker who went over it just destroyed it.
Right.
Yeah,
like and like also,
and that's the thing. It's totally. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Well, I was gonna say it's obviously possible. I mean, if an inker has no idea what he's doing, he's gonna flatten out that image and emphasize the wrong parts of that leg or arm and just make it look completely backward. But then if you go to digital page 13, look at this excellent shot of Spider-Man kind of crouching on the side of that building.
It's so great.
That's excellent. The shadows are right. The anatomy's right. Like, this position, like, everything just works in that shot.
Even the panel under it with, like, the dramatic lighting on this kid is really great, too. Like, there is some great stuff in here, as usual, but for some reason, I just kept finding a lot of, poses that were broken.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, like,
Jolie,
outside of the anatomy, I would say that there are other things that the artist or the artists were doing. Like, let's stay on like page 13, where we use the zip tone to suggest a light or a light that the light is giving off from the moon. Like, amazing. Also, what do they call it? The next page 14, when they use facsimile.
Where? Oh, do you mean like
the building there, in the rendering of the building?
I have no idea. Do you mean how it just looks like super realistic, or what do you mean?
Like how it's lit?
Yeah, like they didn't render that. They used a photocopy of a black and white image.
I think that you're right. Yeah, I think there's no name for it. They just, or it could be, what did Kirby used to use, not montage. Geez, I can't remember what Kirby's technique was. Yeah, when he would just like photocopy a bunch of stuff and just throw it in. I can't remember what that's called. But yeah, this is slightly different where he's trying to hide the fact that it's photocopied. But I don't know. I mean, he might have drawn it, but there's definitely other artists like John Byrne that would just literally Xerox a city and just ink over it.
Right.
So maybe that's what Ed Hannigan did here. I'm not sure. But yeah.
I think for this panel it works. I think it.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think I like the minimal detail on it too. Like it's detailed enough that you can like understand the like structure of the building and how the light is hitting it, and it works well with just the silhouette of Spider-Man at the top. Mm-hmm. You get the idea, and it's. I think it's a clever way to get stuff done quickly without compromising the art. So
right.
I like it.
Yeah, I find the art is more, it takes more risks, and they use more technique in this issue. So that, like, think, because that excited me so much, I forgave maybe the small or big anatomy, strangeness in anatomy. So, like, if you go to page 15, like digital 15, where it's at that big splash page of Ollie inside the toy store.
So great.
And if you look, I know, right? Like, if you look at the wing of the plane,
yeah,
like they use like instead of using those like typical brush like crosshatch strokes or even that zip tone, they use pointillist technique, and like not a lot of comic book artists sort of are that adventurous. I would say, yeah. Like someone here has a fine art background for sure.
Well, yeah, probably Ed Hannigan. I'm going to guess he's a great art. I think he was the art director of DC at one point.
Really?
I could be wrong about that though. Yeah, I think so. Like another artist I never really noticed as a kid, but now that I'm going back and reading these issues, I'm like, oh my god, he's clearly got skill. Like even if you just want to jump, to the very very last page, digital 23, that big giant close up of Deborah Whitman crying, and then the 3-panel sequence of the doctor listening and her turning around. I think that's a great thing.
That was my one note to make sure we talk about.
Oh, okay.
What in the world is happening with Deborah Whitman? Like,
oh, she's going insane. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like years of Peter Parker tormenting this poor girl, and we're gonna end with her thinking she's going insane. Like, and then at the beginning of the issue, Peter Parker says something like, "Whoa, I don't know what's going on with this girl I'm seeing, Deborah. Like, what? Since when have you been seeing Deborah? Like, in every issue, you're brushing her off and like pretending she doesn't exist, and now you're gonna be like, oh man, my old squeeze Deborah, I don't know what's going on with her, and then now she's going crazy because she knows he's Spider-Man. Like, it's so
it's bizarre. And what are women good for if not for their hysterics, right?
It makes me so mad because she's genuinely an interesting character, and I think that her being like a school friend and like not being necessarily like the like snooty preppy girl, like she's a scientist just like Peter. Like, I don't know, they set up a really good relationship there, and then we just had Peter be a dick to her the entire Deborah arc, and it sucks that we're getting this like awful resolution with her going crazy. Like I hate it so much. I hate it.
Yeah, I don't like it either. And the thing is we used to just blame Denny O'Neil, but even Roger Stern and now Bill Mantlo are guilty of it. Like, I don't know what the hell they were all thinking.
It's...
But yeah, they haven't handled this character well.
It seems like Spider-Man is, for the most part, consistent. Peter Parker and Spider-Man, it seems like the same character overall. Jameson, like all of the villains, like it feels like there is a script Bible or like a character Bible for every character in these stories except for Deborah. They just kind of said, oh yeah, she's going to be a love interest, and then they never talk to each other when writing her character because she's different in each each issue. It's not even that it's from each like book or story that's like arc that's going on. It's literally from issue to issue she's different, and Peter Parker treats her differently from issue to issue. Like they don't understand what this character or who this character is, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's not mapped out, and the fact that he says he's dating her, but then all of a sudden he's making out with another girl, possibly having sex with another one, and then she's dating Biff, and now he says he's seeing her. Yeah, it's very confusing.
It's so strange.
Now, Julie, I know you only got like a brief glimpse of that, but what was your impression of that brief scene?
What scene? I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
The last page.
Well, because I don't have any context, I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, why would you include this? Here's the thing that kind of drives me wild about comics is that, like, I understand that they're all kind of continuous stories, but they should really take into account the fact that not everyone has access month to month to them. Mm-hmm. So when you don't, when you include bits of story that are ongoing from somewhere else, someone like me who may have just, like, what if this was the first issue of Spider-Man that I ever picked up? Ever. Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't know what's happening, and I would be extremely turned off by this based on the way that Peter Parker seems to be treating women. So, like, that's my impression of it, is that if I go into reading comics as if I were blind to the plots or the characters or whatever. Anytime I've asked to read and review something new. So it's very hard for me to see something like this and go, wait a second, were we not just fighting? Like we were all just fighting, and now we've gone on to something else I don't understand. Like, and it says we'll get into it next month, but it's like, but he's been doing this he's obviously been doing this since before, and I don't understand where this is coming from. And they're just painting her to be like this tortured woman.
Mm-hmm. And this has been going on for 3 years now, if we're thinking about it. Like, actual time-wise. Like, I think it was the beginning of when we started reading in the 80s. Like, Peter Parker would treat Deborah Whitman differently from, like, each month's story. Like, in Amazing, he would be friends with her, and, like, they'd be, like, going on dates, but then he'd have to leave partway through, and they seemed like a thing. And then the next issue we would read of the same month, Deborah's like, oh, my uncle, he's caught up in, these thugs are, messing with my uncle, and I feel like his life is in danger. And Peter will be like, or Spider-Man will be like, not my problem, toots. I don't have time to deal with that.
Yeah, like, I don't go in the water or whatever.
Yeah, I don't deal with going to the docks, and, like, swings away.
Yeah.
Like, it's so
callous and strange.
Yeah.
And inconsistent, I think, is the main thing, because we also see Peter Parker be sweet and, like, a genuine friend and, like, interested in her romantically, and then the next issue that we read, it's like, Deb who? So
yeah. So well, to summarize the issue, though, so not my definitely one of my least favorite issues of Spectacular lately. I still think it's decent, but definitely not my favorite.
Yeah, agreed.
So
yeah, like, is this the main series or the main title? I don't.
Well, what do you mean?
Is Spectacular Spider-Man the main title for the Spider-Man?
No, I would say
Amazing
Spider-Man
is the flagship. Yeah.
Okay.
It was the first one.
But
okay.
So it usually has the best writer and the best artist, and that's why Roger Stern had started out on Peter Parker, but then he moved over to Amazing Spider-Man a few weeks ago or a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I give this issue 1 torn up poster of Dr. Octopus out of 5. So.
All right. Okay, so now we are going to move on to our final book for this episode. And loyal listeners will take note that this issue has already been covered in an episode of Quasar Chronology because it features Quasar. Mm-hmm. But, Josh, you have not read this issue before this week, correct?
I actually have.
Why?
Oh, you did?
Yes, because I was I was interested to know more about Quasar, and as I was listening to the podcasts about Quasar that I was not on, I was reading the issues.
What?
Interesting.
Yes. So I have read this before. I feel like we're not going to say anything different that wasn't already said in Quasar. So,
right.
I think my feelings are about the same. This story is...
yeah, do you want to quickly explain the story?
So you want me to quickly explain it?
Yeah, do you want to?
Quickly explain it. There's so much happening, I don't know how I'm going to do it quickly.
No
Pretty much what's happening, there's this weird serpent society that's been, like, messing with Spider-Man and, like, biting him and turning him, like, almost killing him for a while. Doctor Strange has been helping him. Quasar's been dealing with these guys with this serpent crown, and Thing has been hanging out with Quasar, and Scarlet Witch has been hanging out with the Thing, saving this crown, the people from this crown, and Doctor Strange has also been tied in through Scarlet Witch. And pretty much what happens is, in this issue, all of these stories kind of come together. These crowns are used to manipulate people, and all of these heroes try to stop these people once and for all. Where this bad guy is trying to stack all of his crowns on top of his head at once, so he can have this, like, super crown to control everybody, and the heroes win at the end. Like, I don't. It's such a wild and crazy story. I don't.
It's a mess.
It's a mess.
Let's put it.
She's a mess.
Yeah.
But there's twice as many pages and twice as many thrills.
Which you would think would maybe help them out, like flesh out the story, but no.
Like, this is a case where, so this is written by Mark Grenwald and drawn by, he also broke down the pencils, so it's like rough pencils.
Okay.
And then Jim Mooney is the finisher. So this is clearly an example of where Mark Grenwald had a story, and he was telling it through different comics, like a little bit in Captain America, a little bit in Marvel 2-in-1, and now it's in Marvel Team Up. But the thing is you look at this and you go, okay, why these heroes? Like, why the Thing? Why Scarlet Witch? Why not the Vision? And we talked about that when we reviewed it in Quasar Chronology. And so, yeah, it just feels like... And here's the thing is, this is also now... We're reading this in the context of the other Spider-Man comics. Mm-hmm. This comes completely out of left field. It doesn't connect to anything else that's going on, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way of really knowing this takes place in November 82 or whatever. It doesn't connect at all, right? There's no subplots connecting anything. The style's different. Like, Spidey's personality's not quite right.
And like, the story doesn't match up either. Like, it doesn't really make sense. And you'd think that if they put aside 5 full pages to explain the backstory of everything that's happened before this, it would maybe clear things up. But in those 5 pages, it probably makes it worse. Like... It would have been easier to be like, these snake dudes are really messing with people and taking control of their minds with this crown. Done. That's it. That's all we need. But we have 5 pages to go through everything, and it just, like... I felt like I was reading a textbook with those 5 pages. They dragged on for so long. When I went back and counted, I'm like, whoa, that was only 5 pages?
Right,
because it was just so long.
See, yeah, my theory is that, like, Mark Grenwald at this point, he was in the 1980s, he was sort of like the guru of continuity. Like, he kind of oversaw the handbook of the Marvel Universe, and he was kind of like the guardian of Marvel continuity. So he was definitely obsessed with Marvel continuity. He was kind of like the way Roy Thomas was with the Golden Age DC heroes. Like, he knew everything. And so you can tell it's definitely like a passion project, and like he enjoyed what he was doing. But and I've read a lot of Mark Grenwald stories, and unfortunately some of them are good, but a lot of them are like this, where it's just obsessed with detail and minutia and history, but it's just not really well told. It's not really entertaining, you know? It's like he trips over all of that history and that continuity.
Right.
And it just doesn't make for a very good read.
No. I'm trying to think of, like, why this doesn't... I think it's because... Okay, so let's take the Avengers movie, for example. They don't stop and explain to you all the characters' backstories and where they've met before. They just kind of like give them a reason to like come together and connect and team up, right? Like you don't have to stop and say, oh, Black Widow and Hawkeye, they've been friends for so long, and they do a flashback and tell you. It's just like, no, these characters need to come together and band together. Whether you've seen their story, like individual stories, and know their backstory, it doesn't matter. They're reintroduced quickly into the story and like brought together for the greater good. And with this one, it's like the villain's plot was more important than anything else that was going on, and like showing you why these heroes have dealt with this villain before. And I think that the first half really just drags on so much.
Right.
And then of them trying to get to the action,
and then
forever.
Well, and because they didn't have a good story leading up to the action just seems like a mess because we don't really understand why the heroes are there. Like, if you set up the heroes are here for a reason, and then it turns into like a big action like slugfest, fine, sure. Like, I love some like comic book fights, but it seems like they just like, okay, this happens, this happens. Okay, cool, fighting time. Let's do this. Like, it's just.
Well, that's the thing is, it's like funny because earlier Jolie was talking about how could someone get into the comic industry without understanding anatomy, and I think, and I love Mark Grunwald, don't get me wrong, but I think it goes the same for writing. There's people that get into the industry that don't have a fundamental understanding of like, I don't want to say, like storytelling, just the basics. Like there's a way to tell any story, and it was not done here. Like this was not riveting. It didn't pull you in. It didn't,
Yeah, this is the comic book equivalent of that Suicide Squad movie.
Yeah,
right.
And it was just messy, like doing a bunch of powered human beings doing like using their powers outside of what you would expect them to be doing, like. And why are they all together for one really, really thin plot? Like, reason, like they all kind of come together because they can sort of sense snakes. Right? It's like it just doesn't make any sense. And like along the lines of things that don't make sense or like are really out of place and really strange is like, here's the thing. If you have an all-powerful wizard, why is he renting a car to get to the action? He astral projects his form outside of the car to bring us a 5-page story about Double Crown. Mm-hmm. And then he comes back and, he doesn't want to astral project both of them to the action. Like, I don't understand why you would do that.
Nothing makes sense. Everything just kind of happens in this issue. Like, the villains are these, like, supposed to be these ancient snake people, right? Yeah. Like, can we agree on that? So why is there a giant robotic snake? But why did these, like, ancient beings have this giant robot?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't... like, nothing is fleshed out properly. It's just kind of... I mean... I don't know.
The thing is it's like a lot of these guys at this time, I don't want to pick on any of these guys because I love them all, but a lot of them are fans turned pro, and it's like, it's really harsh, but it reads like a lot of it reads like fan fiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like this is my... Like, at least, like, with... we're going to jump to the art in a minute, but, like, Ed Hannigan clearly has an understanding of art, right? And Roger Stern has an understanding of writing. But in this issue, again, it's just like there's no understanding of writing. And there's really no understanding of art either. There's a lot of, like, if we can jump to the art, there's a lot of really amateur-looking shots in this issue. Like, even starting from the opening splash page, like, to me, that looks terrible. Like, Quasar flying, it's a terrible shot. And then when you go through, we've been raving about John Romita Jr. and Ed Hannigan, but this is not great storytelling.
It looks like Quasar's being hoisted up with wires.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel so bad for Quasar because I feel like he could be such an interesting character, but he's always just so lame in these stories. He's always like pushed to the side. Something wrong is going for him. Like this one, he's brainwashed the entire issue. Like it's just
he's a security guard, for crying out loud. Like he looks and he looks. He's dressed like he's royalty, but he's a security guard. Like I don't get it. Grumble,
and then also, like, look at this. I mean, the Thing looks off model. He looks ugly. You know, when they introduced him, and then I mean,
also not to mention the fact that, like, when presented with an apparition of one of his fellow superheroes, like in trouble, he's like, nah, that's nothing. We'll get back to the game.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's got to have his juice box and potato chips.
I want to talk about one more panel. It's on digital, page 21.
Okay.
I do not like this shot, this establishing shot of this building, Project Pegasus.
Yeah.
I just think it looks so amateur. Like the perspective. I mean, the perspective's not wrong. It's just so uncreative and bland. And like the way the car is, and then they pull up, and I don't know. It just looks really amateur. You know, it's like Jolie and I just finished reviewing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it just feels like something, like you'd see in like an indie comic, you know? Just not very good.
Like, if you're going to use that kind of, like, amateur shot of, like, the wrong side of the building. Obviously, there's, a way more interesting side of this building.
Yeah.
But you're not using it. Like, just use that facsimile style. Ugh, God.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like now that you mention it, look at the bottom of this panel. Like 1/4 of the panel is wasted on the road and the car and that giant rock. Why don't they, make the building itself fill up 90% of the panel and have the car be a tiny little thing in the background, and because the reader would still know while the car's pulling up, right? Like this is just. Yeah, again, just not an understanding of art or composition or anything.
Here's just look at that one panel by itself. What's happening in this panel?
You mean the establishing shot with the car?
What's happening?
Yeah, you're
Mercury,
right. It's like
Mercury is obviously in retrograde. Look at how big that moon is.
Why is this an important thing to tell? Like, why do we need to focus so much on the fact that Spider-Man's car is pulling up to the driveway of this thing? It's half of a page and nothing is happening.
You're right. You're right.
It's so weird. Like we spend 5 pages on the backstory and it's tiny panels to shove everything in, and then we have half of a page to tell us that Doctor Strange and Spider-Man's car has pulled up to Project Pegasus headquarters. The thing is there's nothing wrong with showing the building as an establishing shot. I agree. But the panel itself is just like we said. There's so much space wasted on the rock and the Thing and the sign and the road. It's just again, it just shows, you know, when you're making decisions, what do you leave in and what do you take out? Right. And this issue gets everything backwards, it seems. It's like all exposition and explanation and backstory, but nothing. There's no story. There's really no story. There is a story, but it's confusing as hell.
Are we supposed to be impressed about how much money this place has, like how big the facilities are? Because if that is the goal, which I think it is, because if you go to digital page 22, they take the time to render in the background the telescope that is there. That the rock is covering in digital 21. Like, okay, cool. They have like this geodesic dome in the back that maybe is like I don't know, something that they use for energy, but like they also have this, obviously, like to have a telescope of that, like of that sort of quality and magnitude, it's expensive. So are you trying to tell us that Project Pegasus is like this huge thing? Because you're not, also, again, you're not doing a really good job.
Yeah.
You're right. That's another good point, is like, what's the intention of the panel? What is it supposed to show? If it's supposed to show the size, again, why is the car in the foreground? The car is like it's like 1/6 as big as the building. So if you want to show the size of that building, you show a gigantic building, and like I said, the car is this tiny little thing in the corner. That's how you show the size. But this doesn't get that doesn't come across at all.
Right, and I think the point they were trying to make with this panel is to show that it's a huge facility that's completely empty, but we can't see that it's empty because the building is in the background and there's a giant rock in front of everything else.
It's so...
How are we supposed to see that this place is empty, right? We only know that that's what is supposed to be, told through Spider-Man's bubble, through his dialogue, and that's it. And I think that this panel is the perfect example to show you why this comic does not work. They don't show you what is happening. They explain everything. And because they have to explain it in so many words, it doesn't make sense. We don't get to visually see it. We can't follow along with what's happening in the story because they explain it to you so quickly in so many words that when it's over, they start bashing each other, and then the story's over. The issue's over. So this panel is like exactly what's happening. We don't really understand through the images, and then we're told through these bubbles.
Yep.
So nothing really works in this issue.
So basically, and as we said, we've reviewed this before on Quasar Chronology, and we didn't really have anything good to say about it. And with a second read, it has definitely not improved.
No.
So this is an example of a Spider-Man comic from this era that I do not recommend. Like, Spider-Man was still finding his footing, and things were still a little bit messy around this time. So, Josh, what do you think?
No. Why is Spider-Man even in the story?
Right.
It's just... No, I definitely don't recommend this one. It sucks because I feel like at the beginning, the Project Pegasus story had, like, such potential. Right. And then it just ended up being this.
Right.
So,
Jolie, what do you think?
Oh, it definitely gets 0 double-layered serpent crowns out of 5 for me.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. I can't recommend it. Cut it up, make buttons out of it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Stick this
Get
Dr. Octopus poster in the shredder.
Yep. I've already read it twice, and I don't want to read it again. Like, it's definitely not good. I'd rather read an entry in Marvel Universe about this story than have to read the story again. So definitely not recommended.
And you know what? Now that we're done talking about this, I will say my little secret is I did not read it again this week. I just skimmed through it.
Actually, neither did
I. You bastards! I did.
I just skimmed through it again, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this story."
I did not read it.
Okay.
No.
You assholes. Oh, I read it again and my eyes. Oh, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Jolie.
Whatever.
We cheated.
I'm just here doing the work. So, anyway.
Well, anyway, Jolie, we'd like to thank you for joining us on Here Comes the Spider-Cast, the world's greatest podcast.
Right.
Yes, there you go. But yeah, Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, for sure. We want to keep this conversation going with you guys, so we want to know what you guys think about the episode and the issues that we're talking about. So find us over at the Comic Book Syndicate on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast. You can find us at the Comic Book Syndicate. And over on Twitter, you can find us at Comic Syndicate. So whatever place is easier for you to contact us and keep in touch, we want to hear from you there.
That's right. So once again, thank you, Jolie, for coming. And based on what you've read, are you going to come back to Here Comes the Spider-Cast?
Well, maybe.
Yeah, we were kind of 50-50 this week.
Yeah. Are you going to give me anything good to read?
It's all automated, right? Whatever comics they put out that month are the ones we have to read. We don't get a choice in the matter. So
that's right.
We'll keep you posted on what we're doing though. So there you go, folks. Until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider-Cast.